The seed was not strong. I repeat, the seed was not strong.
Uh, Catelyn. My lady, you should have sent word of your coming, Sir Donald Waynwood told her as their horses climbed the pass. We would have sent an escort. The high road is not as safe as it once was for a party as small as yours. We learn that to our sorrow, Sir Donald, Catelyn said. Sometimes she felt as though her heart had turned to stone. 6 brave men had died to bring her this far, and she could not even find it in her to weep for them. Even their names were fading. The clansmen harried us day and night. We lost 3 men in the first attack and 2 more in the second, and Lannister's serving man died of a fever when his wounds festered. When we heard your men approaching, I thought us doomed for certain. They had drawn up for a last desperate fight, blades in hand and backs to the rock. The dwarf had been whetting the edge of his axe and making some mordant jest when Bronn spotted the banner of riders before them, the moon and falcon of House Arryn, sky blue and white. Catelyn had never seen a more welcome sight. The clans have grown bolder since Lord John died, Sir Donald said. He was a stocky youth of 20 years, earnest and homely, with a wide nose and a shock of thick brown hair. If it were up to me, I would take 100 men into the mountains, root them out of their fastnesses, and teach them some sharp lessons, but your sister has forbidden it. She wouldn't even permit her knights to find in the hands tourney. She wants all our swords kept close to home to defend the Vale. Against what? No one's certain. Shadows, some say. He looked at her anxiously, as if he'd suddenly remembered who she was. I hope I haven't spoken out of turn, my lady. I meant no offence. Frank talk does not offend me, Sir Donald. Catelyn knew what her sister feared. Not shadows. Lannisters, she thought to herself, glancing back to where the dwarf rode beside Bronn. The 2 of them had grown thick as thieves since Chiggin had died. The little man was more cunning than she liked. When they had entered the mountains, he had been her captive, bound and helpless. What was he now? Her captive still, yet he rode along with a dirk at his belt and an axe strapped to his saddle, wearing the shadow-skin cloak he'd won dicing with the singer, and the chain-mail hauberk he'd taken off Chiggin's corpse. 2 men flanked the dwarf and the rest of her ragged band, knights and men-at-arms in service to her sister Lysa and Jon Arryn's young son, and yet Tyrion betrayed no hint of fear. Could I be wrong? Catelyn wondered, not for the first time. Could he be innocent after all, of Bran and Jon Arryn and all the rest? And if he was, what did that make her? 6 men had died to bring him here. Resolute, she brushed her doubts away. When we reach your keep, I would take it kindly if you could send for Maester Coleman at once. Sir Roderick is feverish from his wounds. More than once she'd feared the gallant old knight would not survive the journey. Toward the end he could scarcely sit his horse, and Bronn had urged her to leave him to his fate, but Catelyn would not hear of it. They had tied him in the saddle instead, and she had commanded Marillion the singer to watch over him. Sir Donald hesitated before he answered. The Lady Lysa has commanded the maester to remain at the Eyrie at all times, to care for Lord Robert, he said. We have a Septon at the gate who tends to our wounded. He can see to your man's hurts. Catelyn had more faith in a maester's learning than a Septon's prayers. She was about to say as much when she saw the battlements ahead, long parapets built into the very stone of the mountains on either side of them. Where the pass shrank to a narrow defile scarce wide enough for 4 men to ride abreast, twin watchtowers clung to the rocky slopes, joined by a covered bridge of weathered grey stone that arched above the road. Silent faces watched them from narrow slits in tower, battlements, and bridge. When they had climbed almost to the top, a knight rode out to greet them. His horse and his armour were grey, but his cloak was the rippling blue and red of River Run, and a shiny black fish, wrought in gold and obsidian, pinned its folds against his shoulder. "Who would pass the bloody gate?" he called. "Sir Donald Waynwood, with the Lady Catelyn Stark and her companions," the young knight answered. The knight of the gate lifted his visor. "I thought the lady looked familiar. You're far from home, little cat." "And you, uncle," she said, smiling despite all she'd been through. Hearing that hoarse, smoky voice again took her back 20 years, to the days of her childhood. My home is at my back, he said gruffly. Your home is in my heart, Catelyn told him. Take off your helm. I would look on your face again. The years have not improved it, I fear, Brynden Tully said, but when he lifted off his helm, Catelyn saw that he lied. His features were lined and weathered, and time had stolen the auburn from his hair and left him only grey. But the smile was the same, and the bushy eyebrows fat as caterpillars, and the laughter in his deep blue eyes. Did Liza know you were coming? There was no time to word ahead, Catelyn told him. The others were coming up behind her. I fear we ride before the storm, uncle. May we enter the Vale? Sir Donal asked. The Wainwoods were never ones for ceremony. In the name of Robert Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale, true Warden of the East, I bid you enter freely and charge you to keep his peace, Sir Brynden replied. Come. And so she rode behind him beneath the shadow of the bloody gate where a dozen armies had dashed themselves to pieces in the Age of Heroes. On the far side of the stoneworks the mountains opened up suddenly upon a vista of green fields, blue sky, and snow-capped mountains that took her breath away. The Vale of Arryn bathed in the morning light. It stretched before them to the misty east, a tranquil land of rich black soil, wide, slow-moving rivers, and hundreds of small lakes that shone like mirrors in the sun, protected on all sides by its sheltering peaks. Wheat and corn and barley grew high in its fields, and even in Highgarden the pumpkins were no larger nor the fruit any sweeter than here. They stood at the western end of the valley where the high road crested the last pass and began its winding descent to the bottomlands 2 miles below. The vale was narrow here, no more than a half-day's ride across, and the northern mountains seemed so close that Catelyn could almost reach out and touch them. Looming over them all was the jagged peak called the Giant's Lance, a mountain that even mountains looked up to, its head lost in icy mists 3.5 miles above the valley floor. Over its massive western shoulder flowed the ghost torrent of Alyssa's tears. Even from this distance Catelyn could make out the shining silver thread, bright against the dark stone. When her uncle saw that she'd stopped, he moved his horse closer and pointed. It's there beside Alyssa's tears. All you can see from here is a flush of white every now and then, if you look hard and the sun hits the walls just right. 7 towers, Ned had told her, like white daggers thrust into the belly of the sky, so high you can stand on the parapets and look down on the clouds. How long a ride? She asked. We can be at the mountains by nightfall, Uncle Brynden said, but the climb will take another day. Sir Roderick Castle spoke up from behind. My lady, he said, I fear I can go no farther today. His face sagged beneath his ragged, new-grown whiskers, and he looked so weary Catelyn feared he might fall off his horse. Nor should you, she said. You have done all I could ask of you, 100 times more. My uncle will see me the rest of the way to the Eyrie. Lannister must come with me, but there is no reason you and the others should not rest here and recover your strength. We would be honoured to have them to guest, Sir Donal said with the brave courtesy of the young. Besides Sir Roderick, only Bronn, Sir Willis Wode, and Marillion the singer remained at the party that had ridden with her from the inn by the crossroads. My lady, Marillion said, riding forth, I beg you allow me to accompany you to the Eyrie, to see the end of the tale as I saw its beginnings. The boy sounded haggard, yet strangely determined. He had a fevered shine to his eyes. Catelyn had never asked the singer to ride with them. That choice he'd made himself, and how he'd come to survive the journey when so many braver men lay dead and unburied behind them, she could never say. Yet here he was, with a scruff of beard that made him look almost a man. Perhaps she owed him something for having come this far. Very well, she told him. All come as well, Bronn announced. She liked this less well. Without Bronn, she would have never reached the Vale, she knew. The sellsword was as fierce a fighter as she'd ever seen, and his sword had helped cut through them to safety. Yet for all that, Catelyn misliked the man. Courage he had, and strength, but there was no kindness in him, and little loyalty. And she'd seen him riding beside Lannister far too often, talking in low voices and laughing at some private joke. She would have preferred to separate him from the dwarf here and now, but having agreed that Marillion might continue to the Eyrie, she could see no gracious way to deny the same to Bronn. As you wish, she said, although she noted he had not actually asked her permission. Sir Willis Woade remained with Sir Roderick, a soft-spoken septon fussing over their wounds. Their horses were left behind as well, poor ragged things. Sir Donald promised to send birds ahead to the Eyrie and the Gates of the Moon with the word of their coming. Fresh mounts were brought forth from the stables, sure-footed mountain stock with shaggy coats, and within the hour they set forth once again. Catelyn rode beside her uncle as they began the descent to the valley floor. Behind them came Bronn, Tyrion Lannister, Marillion, and 6 of Bryndon's men. Not until they were over a third of the way down the mountain path, well out of earshot to the others, did Bryndon Tully turn to her and say, "So, child, tell me about this storm of yours." "I have not been a child in many years, uncle," Catelyn said, but she told him none the less. It took longer than she would have liked to believe to tell it all. Lysa's letter and Bran's fall, the assassin's dagger in Littlefinger, and a chance meeting with Tyrion Lannister in the Crossroads Inn. Her uncle listened silently, heavy brows shadowing his eyes as his frown grew deeper. Bryndon Tully had always known how to listen. To anyone but her father. He was Lord Hoster's brother, younger by 5 years, but the two of them had been at war as far back as Catelyn could remember. During one of their louder quarrels when Catelyn was 8, Lord Hoster had called Bryndon the black goat of the Tully flock. Laughing, Bryndon had pointed out that the sigil of their house was a leaping trout, so he ought to be a black fish rather than a black goat, and from that day forward he'd taken it as his personal emblem. The war had not ended until the day she and Lysa had been wed. It was at their wedding feast that Bryndon told his brother he was leaving Riverrun to serve Lysa and a new husband, the Lord of the Eyrie. Lord Hoster had not spoken his brother's name since, from what Edmure told her in his infrequent letters. Nonetheless, during all those years of Catelyn's girlhood, it had been Bryndon the Blackfish to whom Lord Hoster's children had run with their tears and their tails, when father was too busy and mother too ill. Catelyn, Lysa, Edmure, and yes, even Peter Baelish, their father's ward. He had listened to them all patiently, as he listened now, laughing at their triumphs and sympathizing with their childish misfortunes. When she was done, her uncle remained silent for a long time, as his horse negotiated the next steep rocky trail. "Your father must be told," he said at last. "If the Lannisters should march, Winterfell is remote, and the Vale is walled up behind its mountains, but Riverrun lies right in their path." "I'd had the same fear," Catelyn admitted. "I shall ask Maester Coleman to send a bird when we reach the Eyrie." She had other messages to send as well, the commands that Ned had given her for his bannermen, to ready the defences of the north. "What is the mood in the Vale?" she asked. "Angry," Bryndon Tully admitted. "Lord John was much loved, and the insult was keenly felt when the king named Jaime Lannister to an office the Aarons had held for 300 years. Lysa has commanded us to call her son the true Warden of the East, but no one is fooled. Nor is your sister alone in wondering at the manner of the Hand's death. None dare say John was murdered, not openly, but suspicion casts a long shadow." He gave Catelyn a look, his mouth tight. "And there is the boy." "The boy? What of him?" She ducked her head as they passed under a low overhang of rock and around a sharp turn. Her uncle's voice was troubled. "Lord Robert," he sighed. 6 years old, sickly, and prone to weep if you take his dolls away. John Arryn's true-born heir by all the gods. Yet there are some who say he is too weak to sit his father's seat. Nestor Royce has been High Steward these past 14 years, while Lord John served in King's Landing, and many whisper he should rule until the boy comes of age. Others believe that Lysa must marry again, and soon. Already the suitors gather like crows on a battlefield. The Eyrie is full of them." "I might have expected that," Catelyn said. Small wonder there. Lysa was still young, and the kingdom of Mountain and Vale made a handsome wedding gift. "Will Lysa take another husband?" "She says yes, provided she finds a man who suits her," Bryndon Tully said. "But she's already rejected Lord Nestor and a dozen other suitable men. She swears that this time she will choose her lord husband." "You of all people cannot scarce fault her for that." Sir Bryndon snorted. "Nor do I, but It seems Liza is only playing at courtship. She enjoys the sport, but I believe your sister intends to rule herself until her boy is old enough to be the Lord of the Eyrie in truth as well as in name. A woman can rule as wisely as a man, Catelyn said. The right woman can, her uncle said with a sideways glance. Make no mistake, Cat. Liza is not you. He hesitated for a moment. If truth be told, I fear you may not find your sister as helpful as you would like. She was puzzled. What do you mean? The Liza that came back from King's Landing is not the same girl who went south with her husband when he was named Hand. Those years were hard for her. You must know. Lord Arryn was a dutiful husband, but their marriage was made from politics, not passion. As was my own. They began the same, but your ending has been happier than your sister's. 2 babes stillborn, twice as many miscarriages, Lord Arryn's death. Catelyn, the gods gave Liza only 1 child, and he is all your sister lives for now, poor boy. Small wonder she fled rather than see him handed over to the Lannisters. Your sister is afraid, child, and the Lannisters are what she fears most. She ran to the Vale, stealing away from the Red Keep like a thief in the night, and all to snatch her son out of the lion's mouth. And now you've brought the lion to her door. In chains, Catelyn said. A crevasse yawned on her right, falling away into the darkness. She reined up her horse and picked her way along by careful step. No? Her uncle glanced back to where Tyrion Lannister was making his slow descent behind them. I see an axe on his saddle, a dirk at his belt, and a sellsword that trails after him like a hungry shadow. What are the chains, sweet one? Catelyn shifted uneasily in her seat. The dwarf is here and not by choice. Chains or no, he is my prisoner. Liza will want him to answer for his crimes no less than I. It was her own lord husband the Lannisters murdered, and by her own letter that first warned us against them. Brynden Blackfish gave her a wary smile. I hope you're right, child, he sighed, in tones that said she was wrong. The sun was well to the west by the time the slope began to flatten beneath the hooves of their horses. The road widened and grew straight, and for the first time Catelyn noticed wildflowers and grasses growing. Once they reached the valley floor, the going was faster, and they made good time, cantering through verdant green woods and sleepy little hamlets, past orchards and golden wheat fields, splashing across a dozen sunlit streams. Her uncle sent a standard bearer ahead of them, a double banner flying from his staff, the moon and falcon of House Arryn on high, and below it his own black fish. Farm wagons and merchants' carts and riders from lesser houses moved aside to let them pass. Even so, it was full dark before they reached the stout castle that stood at the foot of the giant's lance. Torches flickered atop its ramparts, and the horned moon danced upon the dark waters of its moat. The drawbridge was up and the portcullis down, but Catelyn saw lights burning in the gatehouse and spilling from the windows of the square towers beyond. The gates of the moon, her uncle said as the party drew rein. His standard-bearer rode to the edge of the moat to hail the men in the gatehouse. Lord Nestor's seat. He should be expecting us. Look up! Catelyn raised her eyes up, and up, and up. At first all she saw was stone and trees, the looming mass of the great mountain shrouded in night, as black as a starless sky. Then she noticed the glow of distant fires well above them, a tower keep, built upon the steep side of the mountain, its lights like orange ice, staring down from above. Above that was another, higher and more distant, and still a higher third, no more than a flickering spark in the sky. And finally, up where the falcon soared, a flash of white in the moonlight. Vertigo washed over her as she stared upward at the pale towers so far above. The Eyrie, she heard Marillion mutter, awed. The sharp voice of Tyrion Lannister broke in. The Arryns must not be over-fond of company. If you're planning to make us climb that mountain in the dark, I'd rather you killed me here. We'll spend the night here and make the ascent on the morrow, Brynden told him. I can scarcely wait, the dwarf replied. How do we get up there? I have no experience at riding goats. Mules, Brynden said, smiling. There are steps carved into the mountains, Catelyn said. Ned had told her about them when he talked about his youth here with Robert Baratheon and Jon Arryn. Her uncle nodded. "It is too dark to see them, but the steps are there. Too steep and narrow for horses, but mules can manage most of the way. The path is guarded by 3 way castles, stone and snow and sky. The mules will take us up as far as Skye." Tyrion Lannister glanced up doubtfully. "And beyond that?" Brynden smiled. "Beyond that, the path is too steep even for mules. We ascend on foot the rest of the way, or perchance you'd rather ride a basket. The Eyrie clings to the mountain directly above Skye, and in its cellars are 6 great winches with long iron chains to draw supplies up from below. If you prefer, my Lord Lannister, I can arrange for you to ride up with the bread and beer and apples." The dwarf gave a bark of laughter. "Would that I were a pumpkin," he said. "Alas, my lord father would no doubt be most chagrined if his son of Lannister went to his fate like a load of turnips. If you ascend on foot, I fear I must do the same. We Lannisters do have a certain pride." "Pride?" Catelyn snapped. His mocking tone and easy manner made her angry. "Arrogance, some might call it. Arrogance and avarice, and lust for power." "My brother is undoubtedly arrogant," Tyrion Lannister replied. "My father is the soul of avarice, and my sweet sister Cersei lust for power with every waking breath. I, however, am innocent as a little lamb. Shall I bleat for you?" He grinned. The drawbridge came creaking down before she could reply, and they heard the sound of oiled change as the portcullis was drawn up. Men-at-arms carried burning brands out to light their way, and her uncle led them across the moat. Sir Nestor Royce, High Steward of the Vale and Keeper of the Gates of the Moon, was waiting in the yard to greet them, surrounded by his knights. "Lady Stark," he said, bowing. He was a massive, barrel-chested man, and his bow was clumsy. Catelyn dismounted to stand before him. "Lord Nestor," she said. She knew the man only by reputation, Bronze Yon's cousin from a lesser branch of House Royce, yet still a formidable lord in his own right. "We have had a long and tiring journey. I would beg the hospitality of your roof tonight, if I might." "My roof is yours, my lady," Lord Nestor returned gruffly. "But your sister, Lady Lysa, has sent down word from the Eyrie. She wishes to see you at once. The rest of your party will be housed here and sent up at first light." Her uncle swung off his horse. "What madness is this?" he said bluntly. Brynden Tully had never been a man to blunt the edge of his words. "A night ascent, with the moon not even full? Even Lysa should know that's an invitation to a broken neck." "The mules know the way, Sir Brandon." A wiry girl of 17 or 18 years stepped up beside Lord Nestor. Her dark hair was cropped short and straight round her head, and she wore riding leathers and a light shirt of silvered ringmail. She bowed to Catelyn more gracefully than her lord. "I promise you, my lady, no harm will come to you. It would be my honour to take you up. I've made the dark climb 100 times. Michael says my father must have been a goat." She sounded so cocky that Catelyn had to smile. "Do you have a name, child?" "Maya Stone, if it please you, my lady," the girl said. It did not please her. It was an effort for Catelyn to keep the smile on her face. Stone was a bastard's name in the Vale, as snow was in the north, and flowers in Highgarden, and in each of the 7 kingdoms custom had fashioned a surname for children with no names of their own. Catelyn had nothing against this girl, but suddenly she could not help but think of Ned's bastard on the wall, and the thought made her angry and guilty, both at once. She struggled to find words for a reply. Lord Nestor filled the silence. "Maya's a clever girl, and she vows she will bring you safely to the Lady Lysa. I believe her. She has not failed me yet." "Then I put myself in your hands, Maya Stone," Catelyn said. "Lord Nestor, I charge you to keep a close guard on my prisoner." "And I charge you to bring the prisoner a cup of wine and a nicely crisped capon before he dies of hunger," Lannister said. "A girl would be pleasant as well, but I suppose that's too much to ask of you." The sellsword Bronn laughed out loud. Lord Nestor ignored the banter. "As you say, my lady, so it will be done." Only then did he look at the dwarf. "See our Lord of Lannister to a tower cell, and bring him meat and mead." Catelyn took her leave of her uncle and the others as Tyrion Lannister was led off, Then followed the bastard girl through the castle. 2 mules were waiting in the upper bailey, saddled and ready. Maya helped her mount one while a guardsman in a sky-blue cloak opened the narrow postern gate. Beyond was the dense forest of pine and spruce, and the mountain like a black wall, but the steps were there, chiseled deep in the rock, ascending into the sky. "Some people find it easier if they close their eyes," Maya said as she led the mules through the gate into the dark wood. "Whenever they get frightened or dizzy, sometimes they hold on to the mule too tight. They don't like that." "I was born a Tully and wed to a Stark," Catelyn said. "I do not frighten easily. Do you plan to light a torch?" The steps were black as pitch. The girl made a face. "Torches just blind you. On a clear night like this, the moon and the stars are enough. Michael says I have the eyes of an owl." She mounted and urged her mule up the first step. Catelyn's animal followed of its own accord. "You mentioned Michael before," Catelyn said. The mule set the pace, slow but steady. She was perfectly content with that. "Michael's my love," Maya explained. "Michael Redfort, he's squire to Sir Lyn Corbray. We're to wed as soon as he becomes a knight, next year or the year after." She sounded so like Sansa, so happy and innocent with her dreams. Catelyn smiled, but the smile was tinged with sadness. The Redforts were an old name in the Vale, she knew, with the blood of the first men in their veins. His love she might be, but no Redfort would ever marry a bastard. His family would arrange a more suitable match for him, to a Corbray or a Waynwood or a Royce, or perhaps a daughter of some greater house outside the Vale. If Michael Redford lay with this girl at all, it would be on the wrong side of the sheet. The ascent was easier than Catelyn had dared hope. The trees were pressed close, leaning over the path to make a rustling green roof that shut out even the moon, so it seemed as though they were moving up a long black tunnel. But the mules were sure-footed and tireless, and Maya Stone did indeed seem blessed with night eyes. They plodded upward, winding their way back and forth across the face of the mountain as the steps twisted and turned. A thick layer of fallen needles carpeted the path, so the shoes of their mules made only the softest sound on the rock. The quiet soothed her, and the gentle rocking motion set Catelyn to swaying in her saddle. Before long she was fighting sleep. Perhaps she did doze for a moment, for suddenly a massive iron-bound gate was looming before them. "Stone!" Maya announced cheerily, dismounting. Iron spikes were set along the tops of formidable stone walls, and 2 fat round towers overstopped the keep. The gate swung open at Maya's shout. Inside, the portly knight who commanded the way castle greeted Maya by name and offered them skewers of charred meat and onions, still hot from the spit. Catelyn had not realized how hungry she was. She ate standing in the yard as stable hands moved their saddles to fresh mules. The hot juices ran down her chin and dribbled onto her cloak, but she was too famished to care. Then it was up onto a new mule and out again into the starlight. The second part of the ascent seemed more treacherous to Catelyn. The trail was steeper and the steps more worn, and here and there littered with pebbles and broken stone. Maya had to dismount 6 times to move fallen rocks from their path. "You wouldn't want your mule to break a leg up here," she said. Catelyn was forced to agree. She could feel the altitude more now. The trees were sparser up here and the wind blew more vigorously, sharp gusts that tugged at her clothing and pushed hair into her eyes. From time to time the steps doubled back on themselves, and she could see stone below them, and the gates of the moon further down, its torches no brighter than candles. Snow was smaller than stone, a single fortified tower with a timber teep and stable hidden behind a low wall of unmortared rock. Yet it nestled against the giant's lance in such a way as to command the entire stone stair above the lower way castle. An enemy intent on the eyrie would have to fight his way from stone, step by step, while rocks and arrows rained down from snow above. The commander, an anxious young knight with a pockmarked face, offered bread and cheese and the chance to warm themselves before his fire, but Maya declined. "We ought to keep going, my lady," she said, "if it please you." Catelyn nodded. Again they were offered fresh mules. Hers was White. Maya smiled when she saw him. "Whitey's a good one, my lady. Sure of foot even on ice, but you need to be careful. He'll kick if he don't like you." The white mule seemed to like Catelyn. There was no kicking, thank the gods. There was no ice either, and she was grateful for that as well. My mother says that hundreds of years ago this was where the snow began, Maya told her. It was always white above here and the ice never melted. She shrugged. I can't remember ever seeing snow this far down the mountain, but maybe it was that way once, in the olden times. So young, Catelyn thought, trying to remember if she had ever been like that. The girl had lived half her life in the summer, and that was all she knew. Winter is coming, child, she wanted to tell her. The words were on her lips. She almost said them. Perhaps she was becoming a Stark at last. Above snow, the wind was a living thing, howling around them like a wolf in the waste, then falling off to nothing, as if to lure them into complacency. The stars seemed brighter up here, so close that she could almost touch them, and the horned moon was huge in the clear black sky. As they climbed, Catelyn found it was better to look up than down. The steps were cracked and broken from centuries of freeze and thaw, and the tread of countless mules, and even in the dark the heights put her heart in her throat. When they came to a high saddle between two spires of rock, Maya dismounted. "It's best to lead the mules over," she said. "The wind can be a little scary here, my lady." Catelyn climbed stiffly from the shadows and looked at the path ahead, 20 feet long and close to 3 feet wide, but with a precipitous drop to either side. She could hear the wind shrieking. Maya stepped lightly out, her mule following as calmly as if she were crossing a bailey. It was her turn. Yet no sooner had she taken her first step than fear caught Catelyn in its jaws. She could feel the emptiness, the vast black gulfs of air that yawned round her. She stopped, trembling, afraid to move. The wind screamed at her and wrenched at her cloak, trying to pull her over the edge. Catelyn edged her foot backward, the most timid of steps, but the mule was behind her and she could not retreat. "I'm going to die here," she thought. She could feel cold sweat trickling down her back. "Lady Stark," Maya called across the gulf. The girl sounded 1,000 leagues away. "Are you well?" Catelyn Tully Stark swallowed what remained of her pride. I cannot do this, child," she called out. "Yes, you can," the bastard girl said. "I know you can. Look how wide the path is." "I don't want to look." The world seemed to be spinning round her, mountain and sky and mules whirling like a child's top. Catelyn closed her eyes to steady her ragged breathing. "I'll come for you," Maya said. "Don't move, my lady." Moving was about the last thing Catelyn was about to do. She listened to the skirling of the wind and the scuffling sound of leather on stone. Then Maya was there, taking her gently by the arm. "Keep your eyes closed if you like. Let go of the rope now. Whitey will take care of himself. Very good, my lady. I'll lead you over. It's easy, you'll see. Give me a step now. That's it. Move your foot. Just slide it forward. See? Now another. Easy. You could just slide it forward. There you go. You can run across. Another one. Go on. Yes." And so, foot by foot, step by step, the bastard girl led Catelyn across, blind and trembling, while the white mule followed placidly behind them. The way castle called Skye was no more than a high crescent-shaped wall of unmortared stone raised against the side of the mountain, but even the topless towers of Valyria could not have looked more beautiful to Catelyn Stark. Here at last the snow crown began. Skye's weathered stones were rimmed with frost, and long spears of ice hung from the slopes above. Dawn was breaking in the east as Maya's stone hallooed for the guards, and the gates opened for them. Inside the walls there were only a series of ramps and a great tumble of boulders and stones of all sizes. No doubt it would be the easiest thing in the world to begin an avalanche from here. A mouth yawned in the rock face in front of them. "The stables and barracks are in there," Maya said. "The last part is inside the mountain. It can be a little dark, but at least you're out of the wind. This is as far as the mules can go. Past here it's a sort of chimney, more like a stone ladder than proper steps, but it's not too bad. Another hour and we'll be there." Catelyn looked up. Directly overhead, pale in the dawn light, she could see the foundations of the eyrie. It could not be more than 600 feet above them. From below it looked like a small white honeycomb. She remembered what her uncle had said of baskets and winches. "The Lannisters may have their pride," she told Maya, "but the Tullys are born with better sense. I've ridden all day and the best part of a night. Tell them to lower a basket. I shall ride with the turnips. The sun was well above the mountains by the time Catelyn Stark finally reached the Eyrie. A stocky, silver-haired man in a sky-blue cloak and hammered moon and falcon breastplate helped her from the basket. Sir Vardis Egan, captain of John Arryn's household guard. Beside him stood Maester Coleman, thin and nervous, with too little hair and too much neck. "Lady Stark," Sir Vardis said, "the pleasure is as great as it is unanticipated." Maester Coleman bobbed his head in agreement. "Indeed it is, my lady, indeed it is. I have sent word to your sister. She left orders to be awakened the instant you arrived." "I hope she had a good night's rest," Catelyn said, with a certain bite in her tone that seemed to go unnoticed. The men escorted her from the winch room up a spiral stair. The Eyrie was a small castle by the standards of the great houses. 7 slender white towers bunched as tightly as arrows in a quiver on a shoulder of the great mountain. It had no need of stables, nor smithies, nor kennels, but Ned said its granary was as large as Winterfell's, and its towers could house 500 men. Yet it seemed strangely deserted to Catelyn as she passed through it, its pale stone walls echoing and empty. Liza was waiting alone in her solar, still clad in her bedclothes. Her long auburn hair tumbled unbound across bare white shoulders and down her back. A maid stood behind her, brushing out the night's tangles, but when Catelyn entered, her sister rose to her feet, smiling. "Cat," she said. "Oh, Cat, how good it is to see you, my sweet sister." She ran across the chamber and wrapped her sister in her arms. "How long it's been," Liza murmured against her. "Oh, how very long." It had been 5 years, in truth, 5 cruel years for Liza. They'd taken their toll. Her sister was 2 years the younger, yet she looked older now. Shorter than Catelyn, Liza had grown thick of body, pale and puffy of face. She had the blue eyes of the Tullys, but hers were pale and watery, never still. Her small mouth had turned petulant. As Catelyn held her, she remembered the slender, high-breasted girl who'd waited beside her that day in the sept at River Run. How lovely and full of hope she'd been. All that remained of her sister's beauty was the great fall of thick auburn hair that cascaded to her waist. "You look well," Catelyn lied, "but tired." Her sister broke the embrace. "Tired, yes. Oh, yes." She seemed to notice the others then. Her maid, Maester Coleman, Sir Vardis. "Leave us," she told them. "I wish to speak to my sister alone." She held Catelyn's hands as they withdrew, and dropped it at the instant the door closed. Catelyn saw her face change. It was as if the sun had gone behind a cloud. "Have you taken leave of your senses?" Liza snapped at her. "To bring him here, without a word of permission, without so much as a warning, to drag us into your quarrels with the Lannisters?" "My quarrels?" Catelyn could scarcely believe what she was hearing. A great fire burned in the hearth, but there was no trace of warmth in Liza's voice. "They were your quarrels first, sister. It was you who sent me that cursed letter, you who wrote the Lannisters had murdered your husband." "To warn you, so you could stay away from them. I never meant for you to fight them. God's cat, do you know what you've done?" "Mother?" a small voice said. Liza whirled, her heavy robe swinging round her. Robert Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie, stood in the doorway, clutching a ragged cloth doll and looking at them with large eyes. He was a painfully thin child, small for his age and sickly all his days, and from time to time he trembled. The shaking sickness, the maesters call it. "I heard voices." Small wonder, Catelyn thought. Liza had been almost shouting. Still her sister looked daggers at her. "This is your Aunt Catelyn, baby. My sister, Lady Stark. Do you remember?" The boy glanced at her blankly. "I think so," he said, blinking, though he'd been less than a year old the last time Catelyn had seen him. Liza seated herself near the fire and said, "Come to mother, my sweet one." She straightened his bedclothes and fussed with his fine brown hair. "Isn't he beautiful? And strong, too. Don't you believe the things you hear? John knew. The seed is strong. He told me. His last words. He kept saying Robert's name, and he grabbed my arm so hard he left marks. Tell them the seed is strong. His seed. He wanted everyone to know what a good, strong boy my baby was going to be. Liza, Catelyn said, if you're right about the Lannisters, all the more reason we must act quickly. We must... Not in front of the baby, Liza said. He has a delicate temper. Don't you, sweet one? The boy is the Lord of the Eyrie and defender of the Vale, Catelyn reminded her. And these are not times for delicacy. Ned thinks it may come to war. Quiet, Liza snapped at her. You're scaring the boy. Little Robert took a quick peek over his shoulder at Catelyn and began to tremble. His doll fell to the rushes and he pressed himself against his mother. Don't be afraid, my sweet baby, Liza whispered. Mother's here. Nothing will hurt you. She opened her robe and drew out a pale, heavy breast tipped with red. The boy grabbed for it eagerly, buried his face against her chest and began to suck. Liza stroked his hair. Catelyn was at a loss for words. John Aaron's son, she thought incredulously. She remembered her own baby, 3-year-old Rickon, half the age of this boy and 5 times as fierce. Small wonder the Lords of the Vale were restive. For the first time she understood why the king had tried to take the child away from his mother to foster with the Lannisters. We're safe here, Liza was saying. Whether to her or the boy, Catelyn was not sure. Don't be a fool, Catelyn said, the anger rising in her. No one is safe. If you think hiding here will make the Lannisters forget you, you are sadly mistaken. Liza covered her boy's ear with her hand. Even if they could bring an army through the mountains and past the bloody gate, the Eyrie is impregnable. You saw for yourself. No enemy could ever reach us up here. Catelyn wanted to slap her. Uncle Brynden had tried to warn her, she realized. No castle is impregnable. This one is, Liza insisted. Everyone says so. The only thing is, what am I to do with this imp you've brought me? Is he a bad man? The Lord of the Eyrie asked, his mother's breast popping from his mouth, the nipple wet and red. A very bad man, Liza told him as she covered herself. But Mother won't let him harm my little baby. Make him fly, Robert said eagerly. Liza stroked her son's hair. Perhaps we will, she murmured. Perhaps that is just what we will do.
Yeah, so... disgusting.
Way to end the chapter on a gross note.
I know. Lord of the Eyrie, suckling his mother's teat.
At the age of what? He's like 6.
That must just be uncomfortable for Liza, too. Like teeth.
Martin described it as red.
Mm.
It was red. Just,
That scene from Kung Pao Enter the Fist when he's just biting the cow's nipple. Like, that's how I picture it.
Oh, Lord.
It must not be fun. Not to mention that child is just traumatized. Mm-hmm. He's ruined. I think we're getting off topic here because it's like the most disgusting thing, but at the same time, a lot happened in this chapter.
A lot did happen in the chapter,
but it ended on that, and it kind of just it threw.
Yeah, it just. But that I think serves the purpose of like the Blackfish was trying to tell Catelyn, like
how much she's babied him.
Yeah, she calls him baby. She calls him baby, and how
no way capable of leading the Eyrie, no matter how impregnable. That's been happening to me a lot today. I just can't say words.
And the fact that Liza's just not really in a good frame of mind.
Not in the least.
Like she's not doing so hot.
She's a little crazy.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
My God, though, this was a long chapter.
It was.
For Game of Thrones, it was a long chapter.
I do like the comparison between Liza and Catelyn, because before this chapter, you kind of think of Catelyn as this distressed going crazy type of mother.
Right, like maybe she's...
And after this chapter, you're like, her reaction was pretty rational one in comparison.
Yeah, she's... yeah.
She didn't run home to Winterfell and start, I don't even know, just sheltering her child in such a way that's...
They're psychologically messed up.
Yeah.
Also, like...
And he's supposed to lead a kingdom. Well, not a king, but, you know, whatever you call it.
One of the most powerful, houses, most well-protected areas in the Seven Kingdoms. Like,
yes.
I feel like Martin spends a lot of time in this chapter talking about how high up in the mountains it is and how far you have to go. And there's this gate, and then there's this one, and then there's this one, and then there's this one.
Like he's Warden of the East.
And the castle literally sits on the side of a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And below that is all this fertile valley with all this really nice, like, land and and then...
Exactly.
And then here's your lord.
Exactly.
It's not a good look.
Like you're one of the top 5 most powerful people in Westeros.
Pretty much, yeah.
And this is how it is.
This is how it is.
So much.
And he's like really underweight and sickly. Like maybe if he ate food.
Yeah. And apparently Liza doesn't look too good either.
Yeah, she looks like the older sister.
Yeah, she's having a rough go of it.
Yeah, she's letting her anxiety and her paranoia get the better of her.
She is gone crazy.
And now Catelyn's there, and it's not so easy to leave.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it is definitely impregnable. Thank you.
Maybe not if you had dragons.
No, not if you have dragons. I feel like that's the only way you could take over the Eyrie.
If you had dragons.
Yeah. Because honestly, how else are you going to get up there? You have to go one at a time with this narrow cliff.
And they're going to just be...
Yep.
Shooting you. Throwing hot oil down on you.
Hey, John, I got to go on break. You mind coming? Yep. I got fresh arrows right here for you.
Yeah, like... You're not going to...
They're not going to break a sweat. It's going to be a great time for them.
The only way you break the Eyrie is if you cut them off from everything.
Yeah.
The only way you break them. You don't take the castle, you starve them out.
Yeah.
That's how you break them.
Yeah.
That's the only way I could think to do it. Like if I were not a Targaryen from 300 years ago, that didn't have dragons, I'd be like, okay, we're just gonna starve them out. Mm-hmm. Just not let them have access to food for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And then we'll go up there and see what happens.
And also Liza freaking out, like, I didn't want you to start a war with them. I wanted you to run.
Yeah. That was great, right?
I know. First, Ned's like freaking out about it. Yeah. Everyone's really freaking out about it. And she's like, here's the one person that'll understand. She's here for me. And no.
Yep. So
when the craziest person we've met calls you crazy for doing something, it may have been a little rash.
Literally every single person you have brought this to has said to you, what are you doing? Why did you do this? Maybe you should start thinking to yourself, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why did I do this? Maybe this was not a good idea.
But at the same time, what are you going to do? It's too late now.
You cannot put the cat back in the bag now that you've taken it out.
Like, even if you return Tyrion, a Lannister always pays his debts. So
Tywin's going to want some comeuppance for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I feel like Tywin, at the very least, would probably want one of her sons as a ward.
At the very least.
And she returns him unharmed.
Knowing Tywin, he would probably say, you gave me back my dwarf. Give me your cripple. I want your cripple boy. I bet he would ask for Bran. He'd want Bran.
What do you know?
I think he would. He'd like, give me Bran. Because it would hurt Catelyn the most to take Bran.
It would. But
Rob's
does he
already
want
told
to deal with that?
He wouldn't have to deal with it. He would use all of his Lannister gold to pay someone else to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. I think it would be the youngest one. I can't think of his name right now. Rickon, yes.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe he thinks 2 Starks are worth 1 Lannister and he wants both of them.
Maybe.
Either way.
I mean, that's the very least. He would probably just want to kill her.
Well, right. It would be...
Which I don't think that's really a fair trade if he comes back unharmed.
Who? Tyrion?
Yeah.
No.
Just because
Tywin
would... Yeah.
Tywin would be punished, and yeah.
He would just... He's a very smart man. He just wants that leverage.
Yeah, he'd find a way to get use it to his advantage. And it's funny, the readers haven't even met Lord Tywin yet. We're just all talking over here about it like, well, he would do this, I think. Maybe he would do this.
I don't think that's too much of a spoiler because we've talked about what a good general he is and very tactful.
I mean, and other characters have mentioned him before, how like he's shrewd.
Yes.
Like he's not somebody to mess around with. Like he knows he knows what he's doing. And Tyrion and Bronn seem to be getting to know each other. Catelyn doesn't like it.
And Tyrion seems to be doing all right.
Yeah, he's making the best of the
quips and
he's making the best of that situation. He's not in the chains anymore. He's got weapons. He's doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we got to meet the Blackfish.
We did.
I like the Blackfish.
Yeah, he seems like an alright guy.
I always like the Blackfish.
Yeah.
He kind of like sees through the he seems like he sees through the BS, and he's like, Cat.
He's like, look, I gotta be professional here, but
she's not who you remember her to be, Cat.
She's put on a little weight. Also, that was the nicest way of saying she got fat ever in this book.
You know,
she's become round, or what they say, puffy?
Thick of body. And puffy of face.
Yes, thick of body and puffy of face.
Okay, here's the thing that really, speaking of which, I feel like this is one of the dead giveaways that this book has been written by a man.
Okay. What's that?
When, in the same breath when he describes that she's gotten thick of body and puffy of face, he says, Catelyn, she was not the slender, high-breasted girl she remembered. I don't think your sister is going to think about what your tits used to look like when she thinks about what you were like when you were younger. I'm just saying, that was a weird description. Oh, my dear sister, your tits don't look quite as perky as they used to.
Weren't they up there before?
Like, that just was weird language choice for me.
Yeah. I don't know.
You could have said slender budding flower of a girl and still kind of meant the same thing, you know? You didn't need to say high-breasted. I'm just like, that's a man writer thing right there. If I ever read it, as I was reading it, I was just like, oh my god, Jesus, you had to say it like that. That's your sister. You don't think like that about your sister? What the hell?
Hi, Liza. You're looking a little droopy.
I don't know. That just...
Yeah, I don't know.
That stuck out to me. Like, what? And then we see her boobs a page later.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like some of his language choice in here is a little weird. But at the same time, I don't know if it's weird or it's just the style of writing. I don't know.
Katie did say in one of the when she was watching one of the videos, I guess he used the word butt.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, butt. B-U-T-T, butt. She said that's a dead giveaway that he's an American.
Oh, didn't say.
I guess British writers from the UK, they don't say butt.
Oh, really?
It's not a word. That's not a word they frequently use.
Oh.
Use butt. It's an American thing, I guess.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize butt was like American.
Yeah, apparently it is.
Okay, good to know.
I just felt like this chapter was a lot of location description.
Yes.
A lot of it.
It was a lot of location description and a lot of shock and awe, and
Like
I think it was kind of setting everything up because it makes it a bit suspenseful when Catelyn's been trying to get here because she sees it as her one
saving
grace, and then it's what it is, and it's like, well, what does she do now?
Right. And it was really, really, really hard to get there. It took a really, really, really long time. And 6 dudes died to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
And now it is not going the way you wanted it to go.
And I'm sure after meeting Liza again, all she wants to do is turn around and head back. But you really can't.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do now? Because Liza's like, well, we got to do something with this imp.
Mm-hmm. Make him fly.
Make him fly. That doesn't sound pleasant. I'm assuming...
Maybe they've got a hang glider, send them off.
I mean, they're up on a really, really, really high precipice. I'm assuming make him fly is probably not good.
Yeah.
It's probably not good. Also, Catelyn just had to bring up her anger over Jon Snow again.
Mm-hmm.
With the bastard girl.
Yes.
Just can't let go.
Nope, she cannot.
Even though Jon is not in her life anymore.
I know, I was gonna say, you don't even have to worry about him. He's in the black. He's no longer your problem.
He's not gonna try and steal...
But you know why? Because Jon isn't her problem. It's that Ned wasn't faithful.
It's Ned's problem.
Yes.
It's Ned's problem.
It's a Ned problem. It's why. Jon was never the problem. She just focuses her anger on Jon because she can't on Ned. Because the man has one flaw, and that was it.
Couldn't keep it in his pants.
Mm-hmm. And even that technically isn't like a huge flaw in that day and age when you think of Robert and how many bastards he has.
Like Jesus.
Like Ned's still up there as one of the most honorable men if it was just one.
I mean, Ned could have been Jaime.
Yeah, that too.
I'm just saying, there are worse things.
Mm-hmm.
Although Catelyn holding him to high standards is not bad either.
No, it's not.
You should hold your man to high standards.
And I'm not saying that Eddard was right or anything. I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, she should count herself lucky a little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah. Because in that time, you really didn't have the option to say, well, I don't want to be with you anymore because you cheated on me.
I'm going to divorce you. It's like...
They're out to war and he's...
You didn't know if you were coming back?
Yeah. Fine.
I mean, yeah.
You had to deal with it. Just
you just had to suck it up. That was life. I agree.
So,
a little bit about the bastard girl, though. She's in love with a knight, and Catelyn actually kind of, after a while, feels sorry for her. She's like, oh, you poor thing. You're in love with a guy who's going to be a knight from a noble house. He ain't never going to marry you.
Mm-hmm.
You a bastard. You ain't going to marry that guy.
You might get some.
Maybe you might get a kid out of it, and he may have his own bastard, but you're not going to get a marriage out of that. Not happening. It's too bad.
Shame.
That dude might even really love her, but his parents won't let him marry her.
Exactly.
It's not even about, like, the two people involved, because maybe those two people really do love each other, but if one of them isn't from a noble house, like, that's it. It's not happening. Even if you want it not to happen.
Another reason why Catelyn should kind of count herself lucky.
Yeah, no, she got a good dude.
Yeah.
She ended up with a decent dude, even though she was supposed to marry Brandon.
And it might not be who she originally wanted to, but at least she ended up loving him.
Right, they love each other. They have a good relationship.
Could have been worse. Could have been Cersei's situation.
Right! Yeah, you could have been in that. That could have been your life. You could be Cersei.
On that note, though.
You could be Liza. The seed is strong! Tell Robert the seed is strong.
He is
Jesus.
Not strong.
No, maybe he can be if he stops drinking that milk. even though they say it's good for your bones.
Yeah, when you're 4.
He's 6. He's like 6.
No, even worse.
That's what I mean. That's why it's way worse. He's like 6
His
or
bones
7.
should be strong enough at this point.
Right, he shouldn't need that anymore. So next time we get to visit Eddard again.
Wow, we're just flip-flopping back and forth.
Yes.
Catelyn, Eddard, Catelyn.
Yeah.
I wonder if he's gonna get word from Catelyn. Ned, save me. Help me. I need to get out of here.
No, it's just gonna be Ned. I made a terrible mistake.
I've made a terrible mistake, Ned. The seed was not strong. I repeat, the seed was not strong. But you don't have to make a terrible mistake. You can hit that subscribe button and join us next time to see what's going on with Eddard.
And whether he goes to that brothel.
Yes.
Fun times in King's Landing.
Bastard number 2 coming up.